Hello, Blazer fans, and welcome once again to the Blazersedge.com videocast. I'm Dave Deckard from Blazersedge.com. Behind the camera, as always, is the brain and our crack Blazersedge videocast staff, here to answer all of your questions that you submit via email or on site. And we're going to have a great time doing it, so let's get to it. The very first question came from our comment section of our last videocast. And it says, hey Dave, you keep talking about the Blazers using their draft picks. What would be their ideal scenario? Well, I think that you have to distinguish between possibilities here. We won't know until late May what picks they actually have. So let's have two categories of possibility. Number one, they could get really lucky and get the number one pick. In that case, I think you have to spend that on Davis, and I don't think there's an alternative. He's a potential game-changing, franchise-changing player. I don't think you get that via trade or free agency, so you go ahead and burn that pick and let the chips fall where they may. Then you have the whole rest of the categories of picks from number 2 on down to number 13 or so. In that case, the Blazers would love to trade them. If we're imagining that they can get their desire, I think there are two primary names. The first one we mentioned last week was Kyle Lowry, the Houston point guard. He's experienced. He is cheap. He is the right age, he has skills on both ends of the court, and he's playing at a near all-star level. The Rockets have Goran Dragic, and they would love to re-sign him, I think, so they might be willing to part with Lowry for the right price, in this case being a very high-level draft pick in the lottery, and no salary coming back in return, both of which Portland can provide. So that's their number one target, and best of all, he only uses about $5 million in cap space, leaving you plenty of room to make other moves. The other name I think they have to look at again is Andre Iguodala from Philadelphia, and he is a prime shooting guard / small forward. He's really expensive in terms of contract, but the Blazers can afford to take the space. Maybe they send a Wesley Matthews back in return. The question is whether Philadelphia will be willing to move him for a draft pick or a draft pick and another starter who's not at Iguodala's level. If they are, I think the Blazers bite on that deal. In either case, they could still afford to re-sign Batum, so they have, in the best of all worlds, Lowry, Iguodala, Batum, and Aldridge in their starting lineup, and that's a pretty potent combination. Now, the elephant in the corner here is that they still haven't addressed their center situation, and they don't have any draft picks left to do it. And I think that this is the problem with the rebuild now scenario. There's no conceivable permutation that brings the Blazers everything they need in order to succeed, which is part of why I'm arguing they should just use the draft picks this year and try to spread the rebuild over 2 or 3 years. But if you're talking about the Blazers getting lucky and rebuilding right now, it's hard to imagine a better scenario than that. Question number 2 comes from Elvis. He says, Dave, this season is going nowhere. It's been going nowhere for a long time now. Why don't the Blazers just give up and tank and go for the lottery? Well, you know, that's kind of happening anyway with these injuries by default. LaMarcus Aldridge being out submarines any chance they have of winning consistently. So you're getting your wish, Elvis, just probably a couple weeks later than you thought you would. But also you have to consider, if you want to tank, you have the wrong coach, the wrong percentages, and you're sending the wrong message. Caleb Canales has worked hard to get where he is. He's a non-stop driver. He doesn't want to lose a single minute of a game, let alone a game itself. If you went to him and said, we're promoting you as head coach, but we want you to lose, it would be like telling a 4-year-old kid there is no Santa Claus. Nobody wants to be that guy, and it's just not going to work. You got to let him coach up the team he has. You got to let him drive for wins. You got to let this team express whatever enthusiasm they have left, content in the knowledge that they probably won't win no matter how much enthusiasm and energy they show. Also, you've got to consider how far can you tank at this point. Even if they had started a couple weeks ago, we're talking about a handful of games in the standings. You're never going to catch the truly bottom teams, which means you're trying to go from maybe 1% to 3 or 4% chance of getting promoted in the lottery. That's a lot of sacrifice and a lot of machinations for not much potential gain, not much of a better chance. And finally, you discussed all the people who are actually going out and playing for you. It's not like the guards are playing that hard on defense anyway, but at least they're showing some offensive ability. At least they're showing us a little bit of entertainment. You throw that all away if you tank, and you risk A, it getting out to the league, which makes people mad, maybe gets you penalized. B, it getting out to the fans, which probably makes them disgusted. And C, disillusioning your players. That's just not going to work, so it's not worth it. Let the injuries and the schedule take their course. Let them win however many they do, lose however many they do, and call it a season. That's the way to go. Question number 3. Hey, Dave. I've been impressed by Luke Babbitt's play lately, and you've noted it yourself in your recaps. What are the chances he could be the Blazers' starting small forward of the future? Signed, Eve. Well, Eve, I agree with you. Babbitt is doing way better than I ever thought he could. At the beginning of this season, he had a negative PER. I, frankly, did not know that was possible. Since he's gotten some playing time and a green light, he's certainly helped the team and certainly helped his own stock. But you have to put a little bit of an asterisk by that. There's a difference between doing well at the end of the season and doing well in a regular rotation. I call this the Rudy line after Rudy Fernandez. He was a guy who had a great rookie season. He played well in certain games, and it made you think that his talent was really great and that he had a possible regular spot in the rotation. But when he actually got into the rotation, it was a different story. The defense was suspect. The playmaking was suspect. His contributions were up and down. I have a hunch you're going to see the same thing happen to Luke Babbitt. He's looking great right now because, frankly, the defense doesn't matter that much. The rebounding doesn't matter that much. All that matters is that he's doing something positive in these trying times. When the expectations get higher and the demands get greater, the holes in the rest of his game are going to show more. And I believe those are going to keep Babbitt from ever being a part of a strong starting rotation on a good team. Now, can he be part of the rotation in general? Yes, I believe so. I mean, there's room for guys like Kyle Korver in this league, for instance, who can really hit a three, do a couple other things, but aren't expected to fill 40 minutes a game or play all around. And I think Luke Babbitt can be exactly that kind of player, and I love what he's shown in his determination, his dedication, and his perseverance in order to get to the point he has. But let's let him play a little bit and just enjoy what he can give before we start making proclamations about what he will do. And now Steve writes, Dave, how much should the Blazers re-sign J.J. Hickson for, and do you think he will re-sign with Portland? Well, I think they should offer him a modest contract. We're probably talking somewhere between $3 and $5 million a year, you know, in that range. I think that he should be willing to accept that kind of contract on a short-term basis, and the Blazers should be willing to give it to him because A, it's cheap, and B, they get to try him out for an entire season and see if he really fits before spending serious money on him. Now, will he actually resign? I think if he's smart as opposed to greedy, he will. Because as he's found out, it's hard to find a situation in which you both fit and you're valued, and he's found both here. So maybe he could make a little more somewhere else given his recent level of play, who knows. But if I were him, I'd be eager to resign with the Blazers and see if this could become a long-term home. This question asked, Dave, what did you think of Dwayne Wade's statements last week about wanting to get paid for playing in the Summer Olympics? This is just another overpaid, arrogant athlete out of touch with reality, and I'm ashamed to share a name with him. Signed, Dwayne. Well, Dwayne, you don't have to worry because you spell it differently for one thing. But I think you also have to take a minute to understand Wade's perspective. This is a classic example of how something can be right from a certain point of view, but when you put it in context, it turns out all wrong. Dwayne Wade, I think, is right. USA Basketball is making money off of these guys. Somebody is getting paid. His complaint is the guys who are producing the product are not seeing that money. Now, our instinctive response is also a classic one. Shut up, Mr. Entertainer. Just go ahead and do your thing while the fat cats make the money off of you. The modern athlete is not going to put up with that, and rightfully so. If someone's raking in a paycheck from him, he wants his cut, and you can understand that. Nor do I find the rampant response that he should be honored to play for his country very convincing. Now, I am a patriot. I believe in this country. I am honored to be an American and part of what we do here. I think we're the most privileged nation there's ever been, and that's fantastic. But at the same time, you have to realize that patriotism has been used to sell the Olympics. People tune in for the medal counts, not the sports. This started back in the Cold War with the Soviet Union, and it's continued on to this very day. So asking Dwayne Wade to suck it up and play for the sake of patriotism is basically the same in his eyes as asking him to do a toothpaste commercial because it really gets your teeth pearly white. Maybe it does, but that doesn't mean that you can get out of paying me for doing your commercial. However, the part where his rail falls off of the road is that he's playing and walking beside a bunch of other athletes in the Olympics. When he walks in those opening ceremonies, he's next to guys who not only haven't made a dime, but have sweated and worked for their entire lives, in some cases given up college, given up their mornings and evenings, driven to remote locations, trained and trained and trained, have no social life, and not a dime to their name, maybe have gone in debt in order to live out this dream. Meanwhile, he's making $20x million a year and asking for even more from this experience. That's what he should have thought of before he opened his mouth. And what he should have said is, USA Basketball is making money off of this endeavor. That shouldn't happen so that some marketing guy can get a new Benz. Instead, I would like it if the money that I generate for this organization would go to my fellow Olympians who aren't as fortunate to get paid like I do, and I think that would be an appropriate reason for me to give up my summer. Our final question of the day says, Dave, I want to ask you something about the site instead of about the team. Simply, what's your best moment from Blazers Edge history? Signed, Matt. Well, Matt, thanks for asking the question. There have been a lot of great moments. We've gotten personal compliments from all of the GMs that we have reported on and worked under. We've had great relationships with coaches and scouts from around the league, had conversations that I'd never dreamed I'd be able to have when we first started out this endeavor. Those have all been great moments. If you want to talk what I am proudest about, it's almost certainly Blazers Edge night and the kids that we are able to send every year in order to see a game, and the smiles on their faces and the way that they're able to root and scream and have the time of their lives based on what we do. But really, when it comes down to it, the best moments are the simplest ones. I still love it. It still gets me when I go onto the site and I see people having an amazing debate or conversation about basketball matters, not the yelling and the screaming and proving each other wrong, but rather generating interest and generating energy and just having a great time talking about the sport and the team we all love. That's why we started this. That's why it keeps going strong. And those are the best moments I have every day. Thank you so much for all your questions. It was a pleasure to be with you again. We'll see you again next week. Until then, go Blazers.